What is up, perverts and anime producers? I am just a simple new type, and in this episode, we're concluding the gag manga The Men Who Created Gundam. Last time, Tomino and Sunrise completed Mobile Suit Gundam, but the ratings were bad. However, due to toy sales, they were able to finish the series. Now that it is over, Tomino sets his sights on the movies, but he is laughed out of the room with some studio executives. This time, Tomino gets the movie off the ground. We learn more about the animator Itano, and they hold a festival for Gundam nerds. So let's get into this. The studio head says, "Would you like some bubuzuke, also known as a chazuke, a dish sumo wrestlers use to bulk up?" But this is a Kansai expression, meaning, get the hell out of here. Tomino now wants a hot bowl of ochazuke. He has to make something as good as Kamato. I thought this was a movie, but I had no idea what he was referring to. Is this supposed to be a joke and it's supposed to be Yamato from Space Battleship Yamato? Or did the translator mess up? No idea. Tomino calls them amateurs, but Kunio Okawara reminds them of the box office numbers of Space Battleship Yamato. Yas mentions that the 5-company agreement doesn't exist anymore. This was an agreement made by Shochiku, Toho, Daiei, Shin Toho, and Toei, mainly to try to shut Nikatsu out of the business. Tomino calls the president of the studio and tells him not to talk down to anime. He says to put his money where his mouth is and prove anime could be profitable in the movie industry. Tomino says to give him 1 year. 1981 will be the year of anime and movies. Angry, Tomino heads to a pachinko parlor. A Bandai rep comes in to show off the new 1/144th Gundam model. Tomino wished it had colors and a core fighter, but these models sell at only 300 yen a pop. These will go on to keep Tomino's ideas alive for years. The Char Aznable Custom Zaku is on its way as well. Kusakari brings Tomino new keyframes that are being worked on. Tomino grabs her boobies. She attacks, but Tomino dodges. She knew he would do that. He dodged her attack, but he fell down the stairs. He says that she has leveled up. Yas mentions that Tomino's sexual harassment is correlated to their success, which means things are looking up for Sunrise. A shonen magazine covered Gundam, and soon, fashion and hobby magazines began to cover Gundam as well. This convinced the president of the movie studio to sign off on a movie, but it will only play in a limited release and there won't be a second movie. He says if it does better than Yamato, then we'll talk. Kyota, the Bandai rep, made the Zaku 2 Char Custom, but the toys aren't selling. He made it because he really loves Gundam. They have to find a way to push this product. They say the Gundam wave is coming. Sometime later, an article is published in the paper regarding the movie, claiming it will be in 150 theaters nationwide. Besides the president's anger, everyone is very excited about this announcement. The Gundam wave is coming. Kamaki, the editor, gets a new part-time employee named Inoue. He says, "Hey, why don't you handle this issue? I'm gonna go do something else. See ya." This part-time employee will eventually go on to become president of Kodakawa. Komaki visits Sunrise to get a scoop, but other outlets seem to have had the same idea. One thing to note is that the paper that published the article knew nothing about Gundam. They published a picture of Sayla with the name Amuran. They don't have a clue, but this got people wondering the next thing to come out of Gundam. Tomino hosts a press event with Yas and the president of the movie studio. Yas hates being at these events, but he is the only famous person at Sunrise. The president tells Tomino he better not mention a trilogy. This is a one-off. Don't do it. So Tomino doesn't say a damn thing. Yas says we hope this anime will surpass Kamato. That is all. The press conference ends. Well, that was pointless, but it will keep Gundam in the back of people's minds for now. Now they just have to deliver an exceptional movie. Ikeda is drinking when a rep from Bandai approaches him. Ikeda seems to take movies more seriously than anime. He tells Bandai to pick up his tab, which was around $1,500. Kusakari heads to the office to find a giant crowd, and the crowd is Yatate. He tells her that Tomino worked with Komaki to publish the Gundam databook. This is the databook with all of Okawara's designs that we still use to this day. This was all done by mail order. Even though they don't have enough books to sell, they will take everyone's name and deliver it to them at a later time. Animec also has a toy shop in Shinjuku. The lines were out the doors all day. The year is finally 1981, the year the Gundam movie will be released. Tomino is getting nervous. The man-child we saw last episode goes to the store to pick up a model, only to find the store swamped. The guy who supported Gundam when no one knew about it is now late to the party. This is what would later be called the Gunpla boom. Komaki is happy for the boom, but Tomino is bummed out. This is because Space Runaway Ideon was cancelled. The sponsors barely knew of its existence. In the past, Tomino went to Hajime Yatate, who showed him designs for toys. They wanted to let Tomino make a show based off of the toy designs. He looks at Ideon and instantly decides to do that one. They love the concept of combining toys into one giant robot. After the moneymen leave, Tomino says now that they are gone, let's make something meaningful. Did you know this robot's from the 6th civilization? We are going to reset the universe with this show and take off a couple of children's heads in the process. Toy sales ended up being abysmal, and the anime was cancelled. However, this led to him being known as Tomino the Killer, or Kill 'em all Tomino as we say in the West. The line at the movie theaters are very long. They aren't lined up to see a movie, however. They're pre-ordering tickets from Gundam. This movie is about to break box office numbers. The president calls Tomino and admits defeat. He says he can make a second movie. Tomino was able to lock in a trilogy in the end. Everyone was excited until Tomino says the second movie is coming out this summer. It is almost spring. The third movie will come out next spring, so they have to make 2 movies in less than a year. Those poor animators' hands. Tomino says that he will handle the editing himself. Yas explains that Tomino is a master at being a patchwork editor. When things were looking grim on Zambot 3, he was the one who was able to edit a coherent episode out of what they animated. This is episode 20, Night Before the Battle. Yas is dedicated to fixing that mistake, being mysterious. That is when Okawata comes in with a new design. It is the Core Booster. Now that they don't have to sell toys, they're going to replace the old core fighter that Sailor piloted. This is going to be the busiest they have ever been. Tomino calls this his 1-year war. We head back to 1978 where we meet Itano Ichido, who is just an in-betweener at this time. However, this animator is most famous for the Itano Circus. We see this in Gundam. Any scene where one mech fires a missile barrage and another outmaneuvers the rockets in a highly choreographed dance is known as the Itano Circus. I guess you could call it a genre convention or a cliche. This wasn't just seen in Gundam, but also Macross and many of your favorites, I'm sure. But right now, he is working on animating a key. He does some physics to show his animation supervisor the proper placement of the keyframes to get realistic movement. This is what you had to do before all the software did the tweening for you. But this is a background scene in an anime. It doesn't have to mimic real life. Itano is into hyper-realistic animation, but animation budgets wouldn't allow for it. Itano meets with Mamoru Hamatsu, an animation director, but at the time was an in-between checker for Gundam. He tells Itano that his show is all about realism and less fantastical than most robot shows. He soon found himself working at Sunrise as an in-betweener and eventually became a key animator. Itano sees Tomino crying from his own storyboards. He gives them to Yas, who also starts crying. Itano was curious, so he takes a peek. He too begins crying. For the episode, A Decoy in Space, Tomino wanted all the flamingos in the scene as Whitebase leaves Jaburo. Itano says he will handle it. Every one of these birds were the work of the rookie animator. He finishes the birds when Yas collapses. Itano watches a building collapse to study how smoke moves. Kusakari thinks that Itano knocked down a building just to learn how to animate smoke. Back at the office, Itano shows his supervisor how to reduce frames of a bit while making something look like it is moving at super speed, but his supervisor says just to add frames. Itano took this very personally. He takes a few frames out regardless. Meanwhile, Tomino is reviewing the episode with the Stumpy Head Gundam. He sees the animation of the Elmith bit and wants to know who did this. It was Itano. He ends up praising him. He then later animated Caecilia's head getting blown off, and Tomino said, tone it down a little bit. Itano would later go on to animate for Ideon and eventually Macross. As the movies ramp up, Sunrise gets a new employee. It is the publicist Nobe Tadahiko. He worked on Space Battleship Yamato and will act as the bridge between the movie world and the anime world as he has his hands in both. Kusakari says that's cool. We don't really have the budget for marketing and PR, so good luck. Nobe visits Animec. Since they don't have a budget, he pleads to them to help out. Komaki mentions that there are probably 1,000 hardcore fans that Animec has at their disposal. Nobe is going to use them to hold a festival. Gundam sold out due to pre-sales, so its first movie isn't even out yet. This is all buzz in the hopes that people don't lose interest for the second and third movie. Nobe tells them about the festival in front of Alta in Shinjuku, which is an iconic landmark in anime and TV and unfortunately closed down recently. This will be a meet and greet, and Yas, Tomino, and Okawata have to be there for signings. This will be the first marketing meetup done in the anime space. They get a giant billboard to show off the event. Also, the reruns of Gundam were taking off and kids were loving it. Some drunk businessmen stumble onto Gundam fans dressed up in costume. The word hasn't been invented yet, but this was the start of what would become cosplay. Around 2,000 have already started to gather, but once things started, they got up to 20,000 people. Things got so crazy, the cops had to shut it down. Tomino gets on stage and tells everyone that they need to settle down in order to save Gundam. Everyone went silent. The festival was able to continue. He tells them to rise up for the new age of anime. The movies eventually come out and were a huge success. 30 years later, Kusakari, Yas, Okawata, and Tomino are looking up at the one-for-one model of Gundam and Odaiba before they ruined it and changed it to Unicorn. But it isn't complete yet. Tomino says it doesn't have a core fighter, and it can't move. They still have a lot of work to do. And that will conclude The Men Who Made Gundam. This was a silly, fantastical version of the production of Mobile Suit Gundam, but a reminder most of this isn't true. We got to see some big players who had their hands in Gundam. Everything for Tomino was an uphill battle, but in the end he knew in his heart that children can handle drama, and he proved that. Let me know if there's any gag mangas that are adjacent to Gundam that you would like me to cover. But that will do it for now, new types. Remember, according to Yas, sexual harassment correlates to sales. Peace.